we know the Department of Health is continuing to look at perhaps putting other countries such as the US and various other European countries on the mandatory hotel quarantine list here because of the dangerous variants that we're dealing with now. But would that really kill Jerry's chances of seeing any of those US visitors this year, do you think?
I think the story that Jerry is telling is one that we're hearing up and down the country over the last year. I mean, to put it in perspective, even on a global stage, in a pre-COVID year, 1.5 billion people take trips around the globe, spending 1.7 trillion US dollars, making tourism and hospitality the third largest industry in the world. And in Ireland, it's no different. We had 11.3 million people visit in Ireland, across the island of Ireland, and the importance of it to rural Ireland can't be overstated. So, I mean, despite the big support schemes that have been put in place that our colleagues in Fáilte Ireland and local authorities are rolling out, when your turnover falls by €6 billion, it becomes exceptionally difficult and people are under a lot of stress within the industry. Going back to the question you asked about the mandatory hotel quarantine, but since quarantine already exists and that really has closed off and killed off the tourism story for now from an international perspective, I think from a mandatory hotel quarantine point of view, there are a lot of countries on the list that they're not relevant from a tourism perspective, and there is a public health issue which is very important here as well. But I think the one thing that people need to consider is that the connectivity into these countries is something that's hard earned. So when we talk about countries like the US, France, Germany, Italy, they're 4 of our top 6 markets, and it took us about 7 years to grow that business by 75% from 2011 to 2018. And it's something that really I think needs to be just considered in putting hotel mandatory quarantine in place.
And you did some surveys in the countries which would be our big source markets, and you did find a big correlation between vaccination and willingness to even think about making travel plans for this year or next year.
No question about it. We've been conducting research over the last year in our top 4 markets of the United States, France, Germany and Britain. What we're starting to see is a greater uplift in comfort levels towards taking a European break, but leaning towards the latter part of this year, and some people booking, as Jerry said, in 2022. From an Irish perspective, I mean, people see Ireland as a comfortable destination. They think we've handled the pandemic well. But from a competitive perspective, I think quite interesting. Countries that were way behind us on the scale last year, like the US and like Great Britain, have now overtaken us. And that's the positive impact of the vaccine. But also countries that were well behind us last year, like Italy, Spain and Greece, are now catching up because of the consistent messaging that they're giving out about welcoming visitors during the course of the summer months.
And I was really interested, you surveyed Britons on the common travel area. What did you find?
Well, as we know, it's going to be a major advantage in a post-COVID world, the fact that we have a common travel area with Great Britain, because the game is going to change for British tourism when they travel abroad. For example, you'll have to have at least 6 months left on your passport. You'll only be able to spend 90 out of 180 days in a European country. But those restrictions don't apply to Ireland. You'll be able to travel just as you did before. But 73% of people in Britain never heard of or don't know of what the common travel area is. So it's a competitive advantage to us that we'll be able to utilise in a post-COVID world. And I think it'll make Britain one of the quickest countries to return when the time is right.
So they mightn't be paying much attention to the common travel area, but they are paying attention to things like pet passports, because they're going to need them now to come into an EU country like us. Are you trying to get ahead of that by making it easier for them?
Well, it might seem a trivial issue compared to some of the things you were talking about earlier on, but believe it or not, 29% of British holidaymakers are dog owners, and it's always a dilemma for any family what you do when you need to put your pooch somewhere. But you will need now an animal health certificate if you're a British traveller going to any European country, including Ireland. And these are small things, along with other things like the common travel area, that with first mover advantage on, I think we'll be able to, accelerate recovery from the British market as soon as the signals are right to do so.
OK, Niall Gibbons, Chief Executive of Tourism Ireland, thanks very much for joining us today.